This day in sports history. Hey, this is Steve White, the host of This Day in Sports History. I live in western North Carolina where Hurricane Helene left a trail of destruction. My family and I are fine, but others in this area are not. In fact, the situation is dire. So many across this portion of the state and the region just lost everything. Those who still have a home may be without power or access to clean or running water. Some are trapped by washed-out roads. Communication has been severed, so it's going to be a long time getting everything repaired and back to normal. Consider a donation to the Western North Carolina Red Cross or another local charity that's doing work to help those affected by the storm. Let's bring some sense of normalcy back to life for so many who have been disrupted. I've put some links in the show notes if you would like a few suggestions. Thanks. It's This Day in Sports History, hopefully providing a short break from the stress of your day. This dish is a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more sports history podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's October 7th, and this seems to be a day throughout history when big numbers grew on scoreboards. Let's start with the one you probably don't know much about, and then we'll revisit one that you're probably familiar with. On this day in 1945, the Green Bay Packers rolled up the most points ever in one quarter of any NFL game. About a week ago, I revisited the Detroit Lions' 34-point fourth-quarter outburst in 2007, and then the Indianapolis Colts scoring 21 in the final 5 minutes of a game against Tampa in 2003. So there has been some history of teams putting up big numbers in a hurry in the NFL. Well, this one didn't have the dramatics of erasing a huge deficit in the final quarter. Instead, the Packers did all their damage in the second quarter, and they did it in front of their home crowd at Wisconsin State Fair Park. Side note, in case you were wondering, Lambeau Field did not exist yet. It was still 12 years away from opening up, but the guy it's named after, Curly Lambeau, was the coach and general manager of the Packers in 1945 and would be through the 1949 season. So this was week 2 of the 45 season, and Don Hutson was a thoroughbred, anxious to break out of the gate. This would be his final season of a Hall of Fame career, and this was one of his finest games. The Lions got the scoring started in this one, putting a touchdown on the board in the early moments of the second quarter. It was time for Hudson to run at this point. First, the Packer receiver reeled in a Roy McKay pass and went 57 yards for the score. He caught a 46-yarder for a TD a few minutes later, added a 17-yard TD reception, and finished off with a 6-yarder. Now, sprinkled in between those was a 41-yard pass and catch to Clyde Goodnight and a 69-yard interception return for a score by Ted Fritsch. Oh, and Hutson also handled the place-kicking duties, and he went 5 for 6 on extra points in the quarter. When the quarter ended, the Packers jogged to the locker room with a comfortable 41-7 lead. The 41-point second-quarter explosion is still the NFL record, though it is shared now. The 1950 Los Angeles Rams rolled up 41 and a quarter, also, interestingly enough, against Detroit. Hutson scored 29 of those 41 points. His 29 and a quarter is the most by an NFL player in a quarter, and he was in a good spot to beat Ernie Nevers' record for most points scored by one player in an NFL game. But Hutson did not play in the second half of this one and only came on to kick 2 extra points in what turned out to be a 57-21 Packers romp. So from that offensive explosion to another one that happened on this day, and this is probably one you at least have some passing knowledge of. On this day in 1916, it was the Ramblin' Wreck of Georgia Tech, rolling up 222 points in a football game against Cumberland College. Well, I guess I should call them the engineers of Georgia Tech. The original Ramblin' Wreck was a 1916 Model T, but it was just now starting to be driven around campus when this game happened. Not quite a ramblin' wreck of a car just yet. They would not really assume the name Ramblin' Wreck until 1927, but Georgia Tech coach John Heisman did prefer to call his team the Yellow Jackets, dating back to 1905. Okay, so back to the game, and maybe the biggest question about this one is how did this game get out of hand and just be completely one-sided? Well, first, Cumberland had disbanded their football team the year before, but they had signed a contract to play this game, and so they were obligated to play it. Heisman actually threatened legal action if they did not make the trip. So the team that showed up was made up of a few members of the baseball team, some fraternity brothers of one of those guys, and then they recruited some guys from the law school to fill out a roster of enough players to play this one, in case they needed to litigate a call on the field or take a contradictory debate position. Second, Cumberland's baseball team had ripped Georgia Tech 22-0 in the spring of 1916. Tech's baseball coach at that time was also John Heisman, and so he had a little axe to grind against Cumberland. Now, the Bulldogs were on the receiving end of the opening kickoff, and their day would get no better from there. They did not pick up a first down, and they punted it away. And then the scoreboard started rolling up points like cherries on a slot machine. Tech scored 63 in the first quarter, added another 63 in the second to lead 126-0 at the break. Now, you would think that would be enough points, take the foot off the accelerator of the Model T, but of course, Heisman did not. In fact, at halftime, Heisman put his players on notice, supposedly saying, "You're doing all right, team, we're ahead. But you just can't tell what those Cumberland players have up their sleeves. They may spring a surprise. Be alert, men. Hit 'em clean, but hit 'em hard." One concession Heisman did make in the second half was to shorten the quarters from 15 minutes to 12 minutes. What a nice guy. Even with the shortened quarters, Tech added another 96 points. So, some fun facts from this one. Cumberland never gained enough yardage for a first down. Most of their plays lost yards. They did have a 10-yard gainer at one point, but they were so deep in the hole yardage-wise, it was not enough for a fresh set of downs. Georgia Tech scored on every single possession. So, if you did the math already, that's 32 touchdowns. They also never threw a pass in this game, and they ran 3 less plays than the Bulldogs. Cumberland turned the ball over 15 times, 9 fumbles, and 6 interceptions. So, without a doubt, this is one of those records that will never be broken. No team has come close, and of course, why would you even try? But a lot of teams have scored more than 100 in a game, and the last time that happened was back in 2003 when the Division III Rockford Regents beat the Trinity Bible College Lions 103-0. How about another number-rolling performance from this day? I'm sensing a theme here. But on this day in 2017, Arizona's Khalil Tate and Colorado's Philip Lindsay dueled it out in the high desert of Boulder. Well, I've been to Boulder, and now that I think about it, there's no desert there, but duel in the desert sounds better than bout in the redoubt or something. Tate was not even supposed to be playing this game. He was at the tail end of rehabbing from shoulder surgery, and he looked healthy in pregame warm-ups, but he was still the number 2 QB on the depth chart. However, an injury to Brandon Dawkins on the Wildcats' opening possession sent Tate looking for his helmet. Arizona coach Rich Rodriguez was a guy who recruited and liked to utilize dual-threat quarterbacks. He'd worked with a few at West Virginia, and he had one with Tate, and he let Tate loose. Tate rushed just 14 times, but he racked up an amazing 327 yards on the ground. That's an average of more than 23 yards a carry. He also scored 4 times. His 327 yards rushing is the most by any quarterback at the FBS level. When Colorado had the football, it was Philip Lindsay's show. Lindsay carried the ball 41 times for 281 yards. Compared to Tate's numbers, that was a pedestrian 7 yards a carry. He also scored 3 times. So that's 608 yards rushing between the 2 QBs, which set an FBS record. With 5:04 to play in this one, Lindsay scored on an 11-yard run to make it a 3-point game at 45-42. Arizona was able to convert a crucial third down on their next drive, and then when Tate broke free for a 31-yard gainer, it was enough for the Wildcats to run out the clock and put an end to one of the most impressive quarterback duels in college football in recent memory. Here's another one from the gridiron, but instead of celebrating greatness, this story will shine a light on a boneheaded decision. Call back to the September 23rd edition of This Dish, but this was a game from last season between 17th-ranked and 4-0 Miami and unranked Georgia Tech, who had a 2-3 record at this point. It had been a good, close game, but Miami had a 20-17 lead and the football in the closing minutes. The Yellow Jackets had used all their timeouts and had no way to stop the clock, so it appeared that the Canes were poised to move to 5-0. On a 3rd and 10, with the clock rolling at 34 seconds, instead of just taking a knee and letting the clock run out, because they wouldn't have to run another play, wouldn't have to punt it, just get in victory formation, take the knee and the dub. But instead, Miami ran a play, and they fumbled the football, which Georgia Tech recovered with 26 seconds left. It was their 4th turnover of the game, and their most crucial one. The Jackets ran a few plays, and with 10 seconds remaining, and the ball on Miami's 44, quarterback Haynes King found an unbelievably wide-open Christian Leary behind the Canes' secondary for the touchdown with 2 seconds left. It was a stunning win for Georgia Tech, and an absolute boneheaded loss for Miami. This loss may have been responsible for Miami's tailspin on the back end of their season. They ended up losing 5 of their last 8 games, including a 31-24 loss to Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl. And on this date in 2007, the single-bar face mask made its final appearance in the NFL. The generically named Scott Player punted 5 times in a game between his Browns and the Patriots. He was averaging 46 yards a punt so far, but apparently that was not good enough. Player was cut from the team after this game. The NFL had outlawed the single bar in 2004, but allowed those using it to keep wearing it until the last of the lot retired. Time now for your favorite part of the show, the got nothing to do with sports fun fact. Although this one is not exactly fun, but, since it's horror movie season, it's at least seasonal. But in the movie Candyman, actor Tony Todd had to fill his mouth with actual bees during the movie's trademark scene, and he got stung several times because of it. Ouch. That's all I've got for you today, and if you are so inclined, consider a donation to support the relief efforts going on in western North Carolina following the devastation left by Hurricane Helene. Again, there are links in the show notes for suggestions. Thanks for stopping by for today's episode. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History.